going downtown now, getting it all set up. So uh, today I want to do a show. Oh, great, you can tell. Um, yes, I'm going to do a program on the Holy Spirit, and it's a program that is about experiencing the Holy Spirit. There are different ways, that I've heard that people communicate and talk, hear, experience the Holy Spirit, and so I just wanted to go over some of those ways, and most importantly, my way, because the way I'm communicating with the Holy Spirit seems to be a mixture of everything, and so I just thought I'd throw that out there. And I want to start with a reading from the Ur text about the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is described as the remaining communication link between God and his separated sons. In order to fulfill the special function of the Holy Spirit has assumed a dual function. He knows because he is part of God. He perceives because he was sent to save humanity. He is the great correction principle, the bringer of true perception, the inherent power of the vision of Christ. He is a light in which the forgiven world is perceived, in which the face of Christ alone is seen. He never forgets the creator of his creation. He never forgets the Son of God. He never forgets you. And he brings the love of your Father to you in an eternal shining that will never be obliterated, because God has put it there. So I do really, really like that whole description of the Holy Spirit. So what I did is I wrote down some common definitions and purposes of the Holy Spirit that I read, and so I want to read that, several of them, and then kind of like move out of that and kind of give you my take on what that all means to me, or my perception. Okay, and the first one is the Holy Spirit mediates between illusion and the truth. Since he must bridge the gap between reality and dreams, perception leads to knowledge through the grace that God has given him, to be his gift to everyone who turns to him for truth. Across the bridge that he provides, our dreams all carried to the truth, to be dispelled before the light of knowledge. Okay, my dogs are kind of like bugging me a little, so let me shut this door. I mean, they didn't bark all afternoon, and so I get on the air, and there they go. So anyways, I close the door, so should not be bothered by them anymore. So what I had to say about that is I wanted to go from the beginning of the existence of the Holy Spirit. And what I realize is God is all and everything before and after the separation. God is still God and exists in all that is real as spirit. When the tiny mat idea made an illusion separate from God, the evidence of all that is real still had existence. And that evidence and constant proof of all that is real still exists as and in the Holy Spirit. The bridge between the gap of what was made and what is created. Even though the illusion that was made could not understand the nature of the world it existed in, it made science to try to explain it. But all this is doing is uncovering the revealing the spiritual realities of order, intelligence, and oneness that is the Holy Spirit. And it is used to communicate God's reality behind this illusion that we are experiencing. The Holy Spirit is the evidence, or the way to receive and communicate with the perfection of God through an illusion of material form of what we understand ourselves to be. Without the Holy Spirit, we would never be able to know anything beyond what we have made, because there is nothing of God that can be recognized in our illusion of what we made. God is incomprehensible to us, not on the same level of understanding. It's just like asking my dog to translate Chinese for me. It's the ego just does not understand or have any conception of the Holy Spirit, and that was my life for such a long time. I was caught up in the ego world, in the physical world, and had no understanding of the Holy Spirit. I had no understanding of a different perspective, a holy perspective of what reality really is. So Holy Spirit reveals spiritual substance only to us, because that is our only truth, all the truth. And I go back to spiritual substance from the beginning, because I do believe that everything is spiritual. It is awareness. It is everything. It's everything that is appearing to be material is a manifestation of spirit. And so anything that the Holy Spirit has to impart, has to say or communicate to us, has to be in a spiritual nature. It can't be in a worldly nature where we want to do some things, let's say some personal preferences about work or a relationship or what to do about those kind of things. Holy Spirit has no knowledge of those kind of things. What Holy Spirit knows and can guide is how to do those things, and with what kind of purpose and spirit to do anything in alignment with holy principles. But I'll go into that more in depth and as we go along. But what on this first part of it, the points that I really wanted to emphasize here is that when the tiny mad idea had shown up, I believe the Holy Spirit still existed, because everything that God created is eternal, forever. I'm thinking that the function of Holy Spirit took on a new meaning when the tiny mad idea creeped into perfection, and Holy Spirit is to me is in the illusion. We have this veil of a material or physical veil that hides the spiritual nature of everything. But even though it hides that that spiritual nature, it can't hide it completely. Because even if we look within our own bodies, it's still a spiritual manifestation in terms of intelligence. Intelligence is you can't see it, but it's a spiritual aspect and has its function, has its purpose, and it is alive in the way it functions. Same thing like order. The order of our bodies is still a spiritual function. So that to me is part of the evidence or part of that Holy Spirit that still is present along just as God has always been present, but the Holy Spirit is that evidence there that is between the two worlds, that still it is manifested, seen, and being trying to be understood even in the physical world, even though it is a manifestation and a spiritual principle in truth, just like we are. And that part of it right there, for me, is the explanation of the beginnings and the changing of the roles of Holy Spirit, and putting it in a context that I can make sense of it and understand it. The part that I'm having a problem understanding, and I still don't quite understand why the Course does this, is when they use the Holy Spirit as a person. Like when I first started reading, it was a lot of, since He must bridge the gap, and God has given Him to be His gift to everyone, and we turn to Him. So that part of it, because I've went to Catholic school, and maybe that this is where the misunderstanding is coming from. Maybe people that have not been indoctrinated to a God outside of Him that is in a human image and likeness of God is what the Catholic Church teaches. Like there's a man with arms and legs and a beard and has judgments and gets angry and all of that stuff, and they depict him, God, as a he, which is separate and apart from me. And when I turn to Him for truth, it paints the picture that I am turning to something or some other than myself to get to the Holy Spirit. So that is just my part that I really don't understand what the intent was, but I imagine there are some people out there that don't have that problem and then probably function with the Holy Spirit, just as well as anyone else by turning it over to a he or a she, or even in some cases there's a prayer where we take everything and we put it on a altar, and like you take it and as an object or something, and the Holy Spirit does whatever it does with it. And I imagine all of those things work for some people, but the purpose of this is for me to teach what I gotta learn, and so that is basically what I'm doing right now, and hopefully there's going to be some people that kind of will get an understanding of it, or just realize that maybe they're not the only ones that's having trouble defining what the experience is of the Holy Spirit. So the next thing that I wrote about the Holy Spirit that I want to talk about is this phrase that says, "Yet if given to the Holy Spirit transformed them into perfect lessons in forgiveness and in awakening from the dream." If the mind accepts the Holy Spirit's purpose for it instead, it becomes a useful way of communicating with others, invulnerable as long as it is needed, and to be gently laid by when its use is over. So my comment on that is there had to be a time when spiritual concepts, ideas, concerns can be surrendered to a higher understanding, when we accept the limits of our own capabilities. To me, giving or turning illusions over are not a conscious and willing giving, but I believe that it is a release of the reality of the illusions. And for me, it's not like, okay, I have this problem that I can't understand, so I give it to the Holy Spirit, and so I have it, and I give it to Him, and expect something to be done with it. And for me, I'm still kind of like holding on to it in some form. But if I release it into the reality of the illusion all together, for me that is it when I do surrender, it leaves a gap. It leaves a gap or the bridge that's free from the ego thinking. That is where the Holy Spirit can emerge and open up and be able to reveal itself as the truth of my being. And I think that there has to be that, for me, there has to be that gap, that breakage of the ego flow of thinking and consciousness. And so when I release it, surrender it to it, and understand that my mental capabilities are exhausted. My willpower, my efforts to manipulate and to make something happen, or even understand what is happening with it, have all reached their final end, and I am powerless over whatever is bothering me there. And so I just give up my own power, my own concern over it. I guess it's something like the AA first step, where I'm powerless over alcohol. Just admit that part of it. And that to me is the giving it to the Holy Spirit, which it really isn't giving. It's actually giving up. For me, is giving up on myself, and then allowing who I am in reality, the wisdom, the love, the compassion of God, of existence, to reveal my true purpose, my identity, and guide me as to how to live. Not so much for me this exact problem that I'm having. The Holy Spirit reveals everything as wholeness to me. Like the answers that I experience with the Holy Spirit are, I mean, they cover the whole spectrum of any kind of illusion or any kind of problem that I can have. It's basically an answer of this is how you think about something, or not even think about. This is how you be. This is what to be aware of in this illusion, these situations of being in an illusion. This is what to be or not to be aware of, or just whatever it is to be. It is not really addressing specific worldly circumstances and events, because circumstances and events are what I am perceiving, but those are really non-existent to the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit only knows truth, and that is all spiritual truth, and that is all the Holy Spirit can impart on me and communicate to me. Oh gosh, here they go again. I thought that one was locked up, but I guess not. She got away. Hope she doesn't make too much noise. But anyways, let's see. Where was my train of thought? Yes, about the Holy Spirit would be Holy Spirit. Gee, I lost my place. Can only be and discern spiritual truth. And in defining that also, I don't see the Holy Spirit as having any volition, which is evidenced by the Course, as Holy Spirit needs to be inviting, is what the Course is saying, or always turning it over or giving it to the Holy Spirit. And so, like I was saying before, the ego needs to be surrendered, and by surrendering it, it has to be a matter of grace. It is by grace that I come into this state of surrender, of having my willpower, my stamina, or all my mental resources just not being enough to solve the problem or the struggle with living as I would want to. Because I see there are people that go on their whole lives and not have a clue about another way of thinking, and they still go on there. They are, I used to say, people like would have a lot of money, they're blessed with it or whatever, but if they have all of these distractions with money or different worldly goals that just keeps them occupied, busy all the time, and sometimes that's enough to where grace can't enter those situations, and the people never really get to know a different way of thinking. But maybe, when they're in their deathbed or something, then they have probably some time to do some reflection without having to all those distractions and concerns that are around them. So I do believe it is by grace that that the Holy Spirit was able to be revealed to me. I believe the Holy Spirit has always functioned as me, as my spiritual truth, and it was because of a lot of the material and physical had been taken away from me, that which I believe that is grace in disguise, that allowed me to invite the Holy Spirit into my life, because it would not be the ego that would ever do it. It would never surrender its power, and it would never surrender being separate from anything else. And it is the spirit of lack, aloneness, and separateness that are false spirits that the ego exists as. False perceptions of the individual self, therefore not holy. Only the Spirit of God is holy. All aspects and functions of God are Holy Spirits. I am as a Holy Spirit is when I recognize what constitutes my real identity as a spiritual creation of God. So this hits a little bit closer to home for me in what I consider more and more a reality of Holy Spirit in my life, as my life, as being the holiness, is the recognition of the holiness that I am holy, meaning as a extension or part or manifestation of spirit or God, not a false spirit, because in the ego I can live in a false spirit of desperation or false spirit of sadness, which still I'm living in that spirit of, or the essence of. And a desperation is just like spirit. A spirit of God is still, it is a spirit of something that you can't be tangible or whatever, but it is a spirit that you can still live in the spirit as. And so that kind of spirit is a false spirit. And so what I'm talking about is in most of everything that I'm talking about on a spiritual part, it is the Spirit of God that is the holy, gives the Spirit the holiness of all the attributes of God. And the third thing I wrote is this: Holy Spirit abides in each of us. And the Holy Spirit abides in each one of us because we constitute the body of God, where God has never left us. Even though we choose not to acknowledge God, we are the evidence of order, intelligence, and spiritual truth. It abides in and as us, as we abide in it. It is the belief of separation is why we need the Holy Spirit, or we would be lost forever in the illusion that we made. So in this sentence, the Holy Spirit takes on a more personal part of my existence by it being a universal principle, being a principle of God as an intelligence, as an order for me, and all the aspects of God is incorporated into my very identity. That the holiness of the Spirit of God, it constitutes who I am, and not that it just belongs to me, that I have a Holy Spirit and Lynn has a Holy Spirit and Dove's got a Holy Spirit over there, and we all have individual Holy Spirits. It's the one Holy Spirit is individualized, as us, as me, as a Holy Spirit in Lynn, as a Holy Spirit in Dove. And so it's not that we have a personal Holy Spirit, but we have a personal experience of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is a personal presence to us, just like our awareness. Awareness is truth, but we have a personal sense of that awareness. And so, as saying that the Holy Spirit abides in each of us, it would almost be more correct to say that we abide in the Holy Spirit, because we live as that principle of life, that is in everything, that principle of order that is in everything, the principle of intelligence that everything is based on, and that is who we are. We just don't recognize it. But it's but like I was saying, it is becomes more personal to me. It becomes personal to me that I am a walking Holy Spirit around. If all I got to do is just recognize it. And so the next thing that came to me that I wrote down here that I wanted to talk about is the Holy Spirit speaks with unmistakable clarity and overwhelming appeal. Christ's vision is the Holy Spirit's gift, God's alternative to the illusion of separation and to the belief in the reality of sin, guilt, and death. The third person of the Trinity, who is metaphorically described in the Course as God's answer to the separation. The communication link between God and His separated sons, bridging the gap between the mind of Christ and our split mind, the memory of God and His Son we took with us into our dream. The one who sees our illusions, perceptions, leading us through them to the knowledge, the truth, the voice of God who speaks for Him and for our real self, reminding us of the identity we forgot. And so what I have come to realize for me, that the Holy Spirit can only function on matters of a spiritual nature, like I had said before, and not matters of personal preference or ego survival. The Holy Spirit can't tell me what job to take, but to tell me how to function on that job, and can't tell me how to make money, but only to know spiritual abundance, which I had covered earlier. And I also realized that as I actually move into the Spirit of Holiness is when I am most in tune and receptive to Holy Spirit, because I am in the same frequency of holiness. And once again, when I'm moving into the Spirit of Holiness, I am moving into a release of my ego thinking and my ego identity, and moving into the consciousness of Holy Spirit. And I move into extending Spirit instead of projecting restriction. I move toward the reverence and Christ's vision for everything instead of judgment. Move toward spiritual beingness instead of ego individuality. I release a spirit of love because this spirit I have is holy. And when I extend my vision, my understanding, my identity of everything that I see out, I'm the light of the Holy Spirit for the Holy Spirit. I become that light that the Holy Spirit has been for me. I repay that grace that was granted to me to even allow me to know what my spiritual truth is. And so my holiness, me moving into a holy spirit of life, does not only something for me on a awareness level, on a realization level, and of course it's going to do something for me on my quality of life and in terms of getting out of the ego's clutches of separateness. So yeah, so it on that level, it's going to do something for me, which is forgetting that ego identity of who I am. But also, it's going to do something for the sonship, that who is really who I am part of in reality. I'm going to be that light when as I extend, and I do believe that even if there's someone, and I have a lot of people that are around me that have no clue what the Course is, or what that there is something other than the ego consciousness. And of course, I'm not going to go preaching to them or whatever, but I imagine that's my purpose, is to be around these kind of people. But what I'm finding out that just by treating them with respect and non-judgment, and even though they're cussing and complaining and all of that, but me just being calm and not buying into that and just letting them just blow it off, all of a sudden they just start being calm. They have calmness there, and whatever anger, whatever they were complaining about, it just starts fading away and into nothingness. And like I don't have to say a thing. I don't have to agree and say poor you, or yeah, that guy's wrong, or that guy's a this and that, or whatever. It's just being there and listening and recognizing that person for the Christ that is truly that person. I try to recognize the infinite potential of God within each soul that I come in contact with, because within that person is the potential, which is a God potential to be anything that God would imagine for him, or him as God, as a spirit could imagine for himself. It's just I see everyone just so much infinite potential. It's I mean, when I think about it, it doesn't even have a limit on the potential that is within within everyone as a spiritual being. It has no limit, and I really do think that in the future, once we get past the blockages and everything that turns this God potential loose into realization, it's going to be something that with my ego mind can't even imagine the the amount of love and intelligence and order and beauty and wisdom and happiness and joy. I mean, just totally unleashed with no restrictions. It's you know, anyways. that's that's what I'm thinking of. When I see a person, I try to be in that space with them and try to be that bridge the best I can also that I've been granted by the Holy Spirit. Okay, so the next thing that I wrote down concerning the Holy Spirit that I wanted to comment on is the Holy Spirit is also referred to as a bridge, comforter, guide, mediator, teacher, and translator. Strictly speaking, when ACIM speaks of forgiveness, it is really speaking of the decision we make to let the Holy Spirit's forgiveness come through us. In and of ourselves, we can never forgive because in and of ourselves, at least in the world, we are ego. The Course, therefore, wants us to develop a sense that there is someone inside us, not as an abstract force, but a real person who loves us and will help us. And so it is when we are in the Holy Spirit consciousness can forgiveness take place, because as ego beings, ego is not capable of forgiveness. And as ego beings, we are born with that guilt, and the ego handles the guilt by projecting it outside of itself. That is the way I have dealt with guilt all my life, has been through projecting it outside of myself. So in other words, everything that I saw was an opportunity to project this guilt out, this irresponsibility, this victimhood, all out into the world outside, and that is the meaning that I gave my world. But the Holy Spirit now, He reveals to me the possibility and the wisdom and truth of forgiveness, and the forgiveness being forgiving myself for believing in this whole illusion, and forgiving myself for forgetting who I am in truth, spiritually. And it shows me that there is nothing to forgive, because in the spiritual reality nothing ever happened, and it never will. The ego is just an illusion, and what we believe happened or took place in our lives, and what we remember as the past, in the reality of spirit, never happened and never could happen, because it is a subjective experience of the ego, and there is no such thing as a subjective experience in spirit. Spirit is non-personal. It is universal. It is full and complete in its allness and everywhere present in everything. So they're looking at it through a spiritual eye or spiritual understanding. How could anything really actually happen? Um, so there really isn't anything to forgive because nothing happened. But in this ego consciousness, that is my identity as all of this stuff taking place in my past. Go back and do inner child work. And I'm not saying anything is wrong with that, but those are the blockages that gotta be removed so I can have that gap for the Holy Spirit to come in and fill my life. But all of that is all made up. All my individual stories, all my individual creative creations are made up stuff that I have that's not true for anyone else and not true for me. But when I'm walking around, everybody's supposed to realize what my story is and treat me as my story. And if they don't, then they're cruel and they're attacking me and on and on and on. It is just like a crazy, vicious, made-up story that's not even true. It's I can, sometimes I do get to this point, like right now, where I can just really clearly see the nothingness of this ego existence, and it really is all in my mind. The ideas never leave their source, and it's all has to do with me, nothing else. And at the end of this one reading I was doing right now, it says the Course wants us to develop a sense that there is someone inside us, not as an abstract force, but a real person who loves us and helps us. And that person, I believe, that loves me and will help me for me, is not a separate person, but my real self, the impersonal, my divine self, the universal Christ consciousness, which is the truth of who I am and loves me as unity because it knows me and itself as that. So this really brings the Holy Spirit even closer, like Joe Goldsmith says, like closer to me than breathing, closer to me than head, hands, and feet. And knowing that Holy Spirit is who I am on the level of having I'm going to say a personal interest in me being happy, because that's the way the Course wants me to believe it, that it to be so personal, the Holy Spirit as that's what it is, and I believe that's what it is, but it's not like I was explaining earlier, it's not a personal Holy Spirit. It's my personal experience of the Holy Spirit that is universal for everyone, and that is really an important one for me, because I can understand it and I can get it. I can get it that my higher self lives as me, through me. It sees for me and hears for me and digests my food for me. Does everything for me. It maintains me, sustains me. Is that Holy Spirit? That Holy Spirit that constitutes my beingness. but does not constitute my illusion of separation. And I can get that presence. Would love to bring me more and more of a realization of my higher self as it, and is there as that presence of me as life is the function of that wisdom, of that Holy Spirit that is my identity. And so looks like I got time for one more. I have a couple more, but I'm going to go ahead and do this last one because it looks like I'm running out of time. What we don't realize is that none of the information the body senses provides is true, because the body itself is an illusion. If we let the Holy Spirit interpret everything in our behalf, He will teach us to disregard illusion so that we can see the truth of love. That is the only reality in all things. Jesus tells us every loving thought is true. Everything else is an appeal for healing and help, regardless of the form it takes. And what I did, I used to manipulate my moods, or try to anyways, to make me believe that I can willingly generate my own private Holy Spirit to work for me. I thought I can make a Holy Spirit in me. I thought Holy Spirit was happiness, joy, bliss, peace. But then also I realized that these feelings or moods could come through some kind of ego gratification in the form of ego perceived needs or desires being fulfilled. Money or the right job or relationship can facilitate these emotions of happiness, joy, and bliss, but have nothing to do with the Holy Spirit. Emotions can be expressed as a result of Spirit's recognition and fruits, but the feeling of them is not the Holy Spirit. They are not the purpose of Holy Spirit's purpose or function. Truth is the Holy Spirit's only goal and reason for its existence, and it exists as our bridge from our ego to our spiritual nature and our spiritual truth. And as I let and acknowledge Spirit living my life in all aspects for me, as it already does anyways as my body, my life is filled with holiness of Spirit, which is the fulfillment of the Holy Spirit. And the closest that I find that I'm coming in living with the Holy Spirit, it is the Holy Spirit is now not something for me that, oh, I got a problem, oh, I have something I'm dealing with. Okay, so now it's time for me to get silent and check in with the Holy Spirit. What I'm finding is by me living in a spirit of holiness, what keeps me guided constantly by that Spirit as a holy entity, as a holy person, and moving into a holy awareness of my world, a holy awareness of people, places, things, circumstances, whatever the meaning that I'm going to extend. I'm going to extend well, this is what I'm planning here, I'm trying to do, but it's not doesn't always work out. But this is my attempt, is to have my awareness on the holiness of of um, of myself, holiness of this world, and uh, as the first lesson of the course says, that nothing means anything in this world. And so if I can get to the point to see everything as neutral, and as it being neutral, then the only function of it is a holy function. And that is where by living in, Goldsmith Joe would say, practicing the presence. And so in my practice, the practice is to practice the presence of the Holy Spirit, practice the presence of that evidence of God that still bleeds through, if you will, everything that I see and hear and touch has that sprinkling of gold of holiness in everything, that now that the ego can't totally mask in my life anymore, because now I can see the spiritual truth, the spiritual reality in my world more and more as I let Holy Spirit live my life for me. So it looks like I am out of time, and I want to thank Lynn for letting me share. I really do enjoy doing these talks. So I'm going to turn the mic back over to you, Lynn. And once again, thank you so much.